Well then, chapter 32. When I got there, it was all still and Sunday-like, and hot and sunshiny. The hands was gone to the fields, and there was kind of them faint dronings of bugs and flies in the air that makes it seem so lonesome, like everybody's dead and gone. And if a breeze fans along and quivers leaves, it makes you feel mournful, because you feel it's the spirits whispering. Spirits that's been dead ever so many years, and you always think that they're talking about you. As a general thing, it makes a body wish he was dead too, and done with it all. Well, Phelps's was one of these little one-horse cotton plantations, and they all look alike. A rail fence around a 2-acre yard, a stile made out of logs sawed off and ended up in steps, like barrels of different length, to climb over the fence with, and for the women to stand on when they're going to jump onto a horse. Some sickly grass patches in the big yard, but mostly it was bare and smooth, like an old hat with the nap rubbed off. Big double log house for white folks, hewn logs, with the chinks that stopped up with mud and mortar, and these mud stripes been whitewashed some time or another. Round log kitchen, with a big, broad, open but roof passage joining it to the house. Log smokehouse back of the kitchen, and then 3 little slave cabins in a row at the other side of the smokehouse. One little hut, all to its own, away back against the back fence, and some outbuildings down a piece the other side. Ash hopper and big kettle to boil soap in the little hut. Bench by the kitchen door with a bucket of water and a gourd. Hound asleep there in the sun. More hounds asleep round about. About 3 shade trees away off in a corner. Some currant bushes and a gooseberry bushes. In one place by the fence, outside of the fence, was a garden and a watermelon patch. And then the cotton fields begins. And after the fields is the woods. Well, I went around and clumb over the little back stile by the ash hopper and started for the kitchen. When I got a little ways, I heard a dim hum of a spinning wheel wailing along up and slinking down along again. And then I knowed for certain I wished I was dead. For that is the lonesomest sound in the whole world. I went right along, not fixing up any particular plan, but just trusting to Providence to put the right words in my mouth when the time come. For I'd noticed Providence always did put the right words in my mouth, if I left it alone. When I got halfway, the first one hound and then another got up and went for me. Of course, I stopped and faced them and kept still. And such another powwow as they made, in a quarter of a minute, I was kind of the hub of a wheel, as you may say. Spokes made out of different dogs, circle of 15 of them packed around me, their necks and noses stretched up toward me, a barking and a howling, and a more a coming, and you could see them sailing over fences and around corners from everywheres. A slave woman come tearing up out of the kitchen with a rolling pin in her hand, singing out, "Begone, you tag! You, Spot, begone, sir!" And then she fetched the first one, and then another of them with a clip that sent them howling. And then the rest followed. And the second half of them come back wagging their tails around me and making friends with me. There ain't no harm in a hound, no how. And then behind the woman comes a little slave girl and 2 little slave boys without anything on but tow linen shirts. They hung on to their mother's gown and peeped out from behind her at me, bashful, the way they always do. And then comes a white woman running from the house, about 45 or 50-year-old, bareheaded, her spinning stick in her hand, and behind her comes little white children, acting the same way as the little slave children were doing. And she was smiling all over, 'cause she could hardly stand. And she says, "It's you, at last, ain't it?" And I out with, "Yes'm," before I thought. Well, she grabbed me and hugged me tight and then gripped me by both hands and shook, and the tears come in over her eyes and they run down over, and she couldn't seem to hug and shake enough and kept saying, "You don't look as much like your mother as I reckoned you would, but law's sakes, I don't care for that. I'm so glad to see you. Dear, dear, it does seem like I could just eat you up. Children, it's your cousin Tom. Tell him howdy. But they ducked their heads and put their fingers in their mouths and hid behind her, so she run off. So she run on. Liza, hurry up and get him a hot breakfast right away. Or did you get your breakfast on the boat? I said I had got it on the boat. So then she started for the house, leading me by the hand and the children tagging after. When she got there, she set me down in a split-bottomed chair and set herself down on a little low stool in front of me, holding both of my hands and says, Now I can have a good look at you. Laws o' me, I've been a-hungry for these many, many a time, and all these long years, and it's come at last. We've been expecting you a couple of days and more. What kept you? Boat get aground? Yes'm. She don't say yes'm, say Aunt Sally. Where'd she get aground? I didn't rightly know what to say, because I didn't know whether the boat would have come from upriver or down. But I go a good deal on my instinct, and my instinct said she would be coming up from down towards Orleans. That didn't help me much, though, for I didn't know the names of the bars down that way. I see I'd got to invent a bar, or forget the name of one we got ground on, or... Now then I struck an idea and fetched it out. Well, it weren't a grounding that kept us back a little, but just a little. We blowed out a cylinder head. Goodness gracious! Anybody hurt? No, ma'am. Killed a slave. Well, it's lucky, because sometimes people do get hurt. 2 years ago last Christmas, your Uncle Silas was coming up from New Orleans on the old Lally Brook. She blowed out a cylinder head and crippled a man. I think he died afterwards. He was a Baptist. Your Uncle Silas knowed a family in Baton Rouge that knowed his people very well. Yes, I remember now. He did die. Mortification set in. And they had to amputate him. But it didn't save him. Yes, it was mortification. That was it. He turned blue all over and died in the hope of a glorious resurrection. They say he was a sight to look at. Your uncle's been up to town every day to fetch you, and he's gone again, not more than an hour ago. He'll be back any minute now. You must have met him on the road, didn't you? Oldish man with a... No, I didn't see nobody, Aunt Sally. The boat landed just at daylight, and I left my baggage on the wharf boat and went looking around town and out a piece in the country to put in the time and not get here too soon. So I come down the back way. Well, who'd you give your baggage to? Nobody. Why, child, it'll be stole. Not where I hid it, I reckon it won't. Well, how'd you get your breakfast so early on the boat? I could see I was kind of on thin ice there. But I says, the captain see me standing around. He told me I'd better have something to eat before I went ashore. So he took me into the Texas with the officer's lunch and give me all I wanted. I was getting so uneasy, I couldn't listen good. I had my mind on the children all the time. I wanted to get them out to one side and pump them a little, find out who I was. But I couldn't get no show. Mrs. Phelps kept it up and run on so. Pretty soon she made the cold chill streak all down my back, because she says, But here we're running on this way, and you ain't told me a word about Sis, nor any of 'em. Now I'll rest up my works a little, and you start yourn up. And just tell me everything. Tell me all about 'em. Every one of 'em. How they are, what they're doing, and what they told you to tell me, and every last thing you can think of. I see I was up a stump good now. Up it real good. Providence had stood by me fair all right, this fur. But now I was hard and tight aground. I see it weren't a bit of use to try to go ahead. I got to throw up my hand. So I says to myself, here's another place where I got to resk the truth. I opened my mouth to begin, but she grabbed me and hustled me into behind the bed and says, Here he comes. Stick your head down lower. There. That'll do. You can't be seen now. Don't let on your heel. Here. I'll play a little joke on him. Children, now don't you say a word. I see I was in a fix now. But it weren't no use to worry. There weren't nothing to do but just hold still and try and be ready to stand from under when the lightning struck. I had just one little glimpse of the old gentleman when he come in, and then the bed hidden him. And Mrs. Phelps jumps up for him, and she says, "Has he come?" "No," says her husband. "Goodness gracious," she says. "What in the world can have become of him?" "Well, I can't imagine," says the old gentleman. "I must say it makes me dreadful uneasy." "Uneasy," she says. "I'm already so distracted he must have come. You've missed him along the road. I know it's so. Something tells me it's so." "Why, Sally, I couldn't have missed him along the road. You know that." Oh dear, but what will Sis say? He must have come. You must have missed him. He... "Oh, don't distress me any more than I'm already distressed. I don't know what in the world to make of it. I'm at my wit's end, if I don't mind acknowledging it. I'm right down scared. But there's no hope that he's come, for he couldn't have come, and me miss him. Sally, it's terrible, just terrible. Something's happened to the boat, for sure." "Why, Silas, look yonder, up the road. Ain't that somebody coming?" He sprung to the window at the head of the bed, and that give Mrs. Phelps the chance that she wanted. She stooped down quick at the foot of the bed and give me a pull, and out I come. And when he turned back from the window, she stood there, a beaming and smiling like the house was afire, and I standing pretty meek and sweaty alongside. And the old gentleman stared and says, "Well, who's that?" "Who do you reckon it is?" "I ain't no idea. Who is it?" "Why, it's Tom Sawyer." By jings, I most slumped through the floor. But there weren't no time to swap knives. The old man grabbed me by the hand and shook. He kept on a-shaking, and all the time how the woman did dance and laugh and cry, and how they both did fire off questions about Sid and Mary and the rest of the tribe. But if they was joyful, it weren't nothing to what like I was. For it was like being born again. I was so glad to find out who I was. Well, they froze to me for 2 hours, and at last, when my chin was so tired it couldn't hardly go any more, I had told them more about my family, I mean the Sawyer family, than ever happened to any 6 Sawyer families. I explained how we got blowed out at the cylinder head at the mouth of the White River. It took us 3 days to fix it, which was all right and worked first rate, because they didn't know, but it would take 3 days to fix it. And I'd have been called a bolthead if it done just as well. Now I was feeling pretty comfortable all down one side and pretty uncomfortable all at the other. Being Tom Sawyer was easy and comfortable, and it stayed easy and comfortable till by and by I hear a steamboat coughing along down the river. Then I says to myself, suppose Tom Sawyer comes down out that boat. Suppose he steps in here any minute and sings out my name before I can throw him a wink to keep quiet. Well, I couldn't have it that way. That wouldn't do at all. I must go up the road and waylay him. So I told the folks I reckoned I would go up to town and fetch my baggage. And the old gentleman said he was going to go along with me, but I said no, I could drive the horse myself, and I'd druther he wouldn't take no more trouble about me.